And with that, I'd like to welcome everyone to
Right.
Phoenixville Public Library's Zoom channel. I'm Mark Pinto, the Adult Services Director here, and we are glad to have with us tonight Emily Gatto, who is the Director of the TLC Wellness Center. And
Mhm.
Emily, I'm sure, will tell us a little bit about what TLC or the Lincoln Center is tonight. And her program tonight is focusing on self-care, how we can be more mindful and take care of ourselves while we're taking care of others. And so, Emily, go right ahead and take it away. Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So happy to be here and join you all. And I always love to kind of get in the mix of people and faces and places that I don't always really get to outreach to. So I just love the opportunity. So as mentioned by Mark, I am the director of TLC Wellness, which is just an outpatient therapy program. We do have a parent company named the Lincoln Center, so we do lots of different programs, including training and education. So as part of this, grant funded work, running some alternative schools, and then our outpatient therapy program in which we serve all ages. So young kids and all the way up. We are credentialed with Medicare, so the full span, and we're in the process of credentialing with commercial insurances as well. So we're located in Audubon. If anyone is curious about our services or has any questions for me after this, our website is wellwithtlc.com. And the phone on there is my phone, the phone line on there. So it's very important to me that you get a person when you're having a question about a mental health need or something for a family member. So no, don't hesitate to call or text that number. I will preface, we're having some issues with our form right now. So if you reach out within the next few weeks, do the phone. But otherwise, I will hop right into it. Also, I think helpful and pertinent to this as my full background, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So while I am the director of the practice, so I oversee all the administrative operating and hiring and all of that, I also still do clinical care with a primary area at this point in trauma. So I do a lot of trauma work. And I actually, as part of what I'm going to be doing today, is providing some resource tools that we utilize in one of the trauma models called EMDR. Some people in here may or may not be familiar. It's kind of a mouthful, so I'll say it one time in full. It's called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a really great model for trauma and I think when we think trauma, we think of like really big events, and everyone's life has had some sort of trauma, right? Even if it's a teacher telling you you're bad at math, and then over life you're like, I feel like I'm bad at math, right? That can be what, like a some level of a trauma because it affects how you feel about yourself and how you approach something. So it's very broad. But my goal today on my objectives is to talk about the fight or flight part of our brain and how that affects our logic and reasoning. And then I'm going to do coping tools. So hopefully this lives up to what you were looking for. Originally, it was going to be a colleague who's no longer with our practice, who's going to do this. And so our styles are vary a little bit, but I'm a very big believer in less is more. So if you have one or two tools you can really nail down and go to in times of need, is a little bit more effective. That's maybe a broad statement, but I find helpful than throwing like 10 tools out there and you walk away like your head spinning and what do I do? So when I think of self-care, I think of being able to de-escalate ourselves in the face of challenge and kind of back to that whole like airplane model, right? Where they say to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put the oxygen mask on your kids. And so it's these tools will hopefully help kind of be that metaphorical oxygen mask. And if anyone has any questions or there's anything specific you would like to cover or know about, any certain objectives or expectations you had coming in that you'd like to throw out there, feel free to put that in your chat or even to chime in. I've done like a bunch of Facebook lives and whatnot, so I am very used to just like kind of talking through to kind of like my own face. But I am always happy for people to chime in, ask questions, whatever it may be. All right. Um, so just a little bit about the fight or flight part of our brain, because I do think that when it comes to self-care, things start to go downhill if we're not aware of our own reactions to things, right? So say we're not getting good sleep, or we're working overtime and extra hours, or we have family situations going on, or there's just kind of general stressors that are draining you a little bit more than usual, then other things sometimes fall out the wayside, right? So simple things like getting your nails done or taking a walk with a friend or whatever you do that you enjoy, taking a walk by yourself, those things start to fall off. So really being able to tune in with yourself and where your mind and your body is. So um as a little recap, there's two parts of our brain that come into more prominent play when it comes to anxiety and increase in stress. The first part is our amygdala. That's our fight or flight part of our brain. And then the second part is the front part of our head. That's our prefrontal cortex. That's our logic and reasoning. When I'm explaining this to kids, although I think sometimes it helps me too, I think of it as the barking dog and the wise old owl. So when that barking dog gets loud, scares away the wise old owl. So if we think of it like a scale, right? If that barking dog starts to escalate, then it shuts down the logic and reasoning part of our brain. So things that felt like something we could handle, things that felt easy aren't in that moment. Um, so just important to know. And that's why we do self-care things to kind of calm our central nervous system, to calm that barking dog, and to bring us back to baseline. So any questions on that? So what we know, right? I'm sure you all have heard about deep breathing. Like everyone has heard someone say, take a deep breath, or have maybe downloaded an app that guides you through breathing, or, something of that sort. I like to do myth busting with deep breathing because when a lot of people take deep breaths, they say it doesn't work. I've tried breathing, it doesn't work. So I always like to remind people that the purpose of deep breathing is just to bring that logic and reasoning part of your brain back. So when you're doing a coping tool, right? And I always say it's not a solving tool. There's a reason we don't call it a solving tool because it's not solving anything. It's a coping tool to help us cope with a big feeling until that big feeling passes and we can think more logically. So the first step is getting deep breaths so that fight or flight barking dog part of your brain can settle. Right? So when we start to escalate, if we're stressed, even if it's not like an immediate reaction, right? Like a instant stress because of some threat, if we're stressed just overall, we tend to hold our breath intense. If we're stressed in a like more of a panic feeling moment, we tend to hyperventilate. Both of those things tell that amygdala, fight or flight part of the brain, get louder, something big is happening. It sends out the stress signals. And that's a chemical release. So that's really hard once it's released to combat. I always say humans have the hardest job with that because if my dog feels threatened and it's just like the wind blowing or the mailman, the dog doesn't have to be like, oh, this is a false alarm. Let me take a deep breath. The dog's going to react to its nature state. Whereas humans have this tasked challenge of like, I actually have to work against this like natural biological state that my body is going into, whether it's prolonged stress or an acute sudden reaction. So hopefully all of that makes sense, but I like to myth bust breathing. So next time you're feeling stressed, you need to take a moment, you need to de-escalate, you need to take care of yourself and you're taking deep breaths, remind yourself, I'm doing this to help myself think straight. Um, so in terms of mindful breathing, one thing you can do to practice that is putting one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly, and then breathing into your belly and filling it with air like it's a balloon. So you really want to fill your belly filling with air. People who have like kind of skills with this already are like singers because they're actually trained on that diaphragmatic breathing. I have had like even little kids that I work with who have done chorus and they have all these like diaphragmatic breathing exercises. So you could even go into Google and be like, what are some singing exercises for deep breathing? And you will find tools. So that's kind of like a one-on-one 101. Now I totally fine that no one has their camera on, but so I don't know if you're practicing that, great. If you have any feedback, questions, again, please let me know. I am 100% okay with being interrupted. I've been called a master interrupter in my life, something I've worked on in my own therapy practice. When someone's talking, I have a great idea, and I'm like, hold, sit. But I do not mind being interrupted. So raise your hand, ask a question, put it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it. All right. So as promised, I'm going to run through 2 tools that we do. Sorry, there's a question here, so that's why I stopped. Can you explain the Havening technique? I'm not sure I'm super familiar with that. I can certainly look to see whoever that was. Do you want to jump on and say what you know of it?
Sorry.
Yeah,
My therapist, one day when I was like very emotional and like in a session,
yeah,
uh, like very briefly kind of ran over it, but like obviously it was a hard time to like take in information about it.
yeah.
But I think it's like more so like grounding. Like she was like, have you, she was having me like run my hands over my arms and then like, or like put gentle pressure on my chest.
Yeah. So I don't interrupt you. I think, it's funny because I just haven't heard it called that. But it is, looking at it, it's very similar actually to something I was just about to address, which is resource tapping. So did she have you do any tapping?
No.
Okay. So this would be similar. So for those, the Havening technique is a therapeutic approach that combines touch, eye movements, and visualization to help reduce stress, anxiety, and trauma-related symptoms. And what's interesting is EMDR, which I was talking about, uses eye movement. So it's kind of this is more related to the, reduction of stress, but similar along the lines of what we're talking about. So I have not been trained in that specific model, but I am trained in some tapping. And so I can certainly talk about like what I'll call resource tapping. And then we can also use that with the tool I'm going to explain. I don't know if that helps. I don't want to speak on something I'm not trained on, but this does look a little bit similar in nature. But there's definitely a lot more information out there and coming out about tapping, and then resources like that, right? Like connecting back with the mind body. It's interesting. I was talking to a doctor today, and they were talking about which I would look into, like ice baths and the benefits both medically and for behavioral health and mental health and even executive functioning, and how all of these kind of things that were used so many years ago before we were in too much of the modern medicine, we have kind of drifted away from. And so that kind of reminds me of that the technique you mentioned, of probably things that have been around for a long time, and then we're kind of coming back to it as we're rerounding with our body and mind. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So as far as resource tapping, so I'll explain that now. So resource tapping um, is used for grounding, calming, and presence. So when we talk specifically about positive resources, we can use slow tapping with our hands or feet to sink more fully into that experience. So the slow tapping with hands or feet can send a message to your nervous system that it's okay to rest and digest in the calmer or more positive feelings. And when you do that, you can keep your eyes open or closed. So that reminds me a lot of what you had mentioned with regard to the other technique, in that you're using your body and that mind body connection to send the message to the central nervous system that it's okay to rest and digest. So the emphasis here with anything like this, and I would think it would go the same if you were doing like kind of what you described, is slow. So fast is going to be activating. So if we're doing reprocessing, say in EMDR, and we're doing tapping, it's usually at a quick pace. So just note that if we're trying to rest our body and our nervous system, slow. I always make sure to hammer that in. So one really common use of this is butterfly taps. So that's just crossing your arms in front of you and tapping back and forth as you see me doing. This is also, the fancy name is bilateral stimulation, right? And it's something we actually do all the time and very naturally. So what do we do with babies when we pick them up, right? We hold them close and we rock them. Same thing. Or side to side, right? If we're calming a child, we might give them a hug and rock them back and forth. It's just this natural movement we go into. People talk about a runner's high. That's bilateral stimulation, the back and forth. So another way of doing tapping, if say you're in a public space and you're like, I'm not really comfortable to do this. You can't see me doing this at my feet, but you can just tap your feet back and forth as if you're walking in place. You can tap the top of your legs. So you can hear me doing it maybe, but I'm just tapping. I'm kind of accentuating the noise just so you can hear it. But it's really any bilateral. So I'll do this for reference because butterfly taps is just kind of what I go to, but you can do any, and then you might modify that as well for a public space. So that's calming. We're also going to practice that in the tool I'm going to introduce right now. So the tool I'm going to introduce is something you can revisit at any time that you need to put things that aren't serving you away so that you can take care of yourself. And whether that's, I'm going to a yoga class and I want to be present in it, or I'm going to go see family or take care of my kids or go to my job, whatever it is. And I want to make sure I'm present and putting things away that aren't serving me. So as far as creating a container goes, so the concept of a container, I want you to think about a time that you needed to set aside intrusive thoughts, feelings, or experiences in order to focus, or perhaps when trying to sleep. Who doesn't have a night or two where your thoughts are racing when you're trying to sleep? We also use this tool at the end of processing a trauma. So this does, and giving credit to, I did not create these. This is from the model of EMDR. So what I want everyone to do who's here with me now, we're gonna do this together. We're gonna create containers together, and these are individualized. So I want everyone to imagine a container that's strong enough to hold whatever you want to put away in it temporarily. So this isn't like a lock it away forever. This is, you know what, this doesn't serve me right now, I'm putting it away. So think about what comes to mind for your container. It can be anything. Would anyone want, just so that I know that someone's with me here in the sphere of Zoom, since I'm the only one I can see, to even just put in the chat what they're thinking for what this container might be. Something that's strong enough, big enough, and people have actually made small containers and they just shove things in there, but strong enough to hold anything. I've put people in my container. I put my past self in my container. A basket. Okay, awesome. Does anyone else have anything they're thinking about? So the news is something you would put in the container for sure. I've got a big news watcher here in my house and I'm like, so thinking about what the container actually looks like. A barrel, awesome. So here's what I want you to think about now. So like with the basket, even with the barrel, or whatever it is that you're thinking of, what would you do to secure it? So say you wanted to put things in there and you wanted to just make sure they're away. You couldn't see them. They can't get out. How would you secure that? Like I'm even thinking if there was like a basket, like the picnic ones that have the lid. I don't want to create it for you, but like that kind of that idea. So I really want you to do whatever you can to create this image in your mind. Now, I want you to imagine using your container. Just imagine how it feels, knowing that you can use it to hold things until you're ready to work with them. Now, if anyone wants to throw into the chat or chime in on how that feels to know that you have somewhere you can put things when they're not serving you. And if no one's comfortable sharing that, totally cool too. Okay. So now we're going to use our resource tapping. So what I want you to do is slowly tap in or walk through. So as we mentioned, we can tap or do like the steps. As you imagine using your container, notice the positive emotions, sensations, and thoughts. When we tap, it's our hope to really solidify what we're feeling in that moment and what we're using in the school. So I'm going to do about 6 to 8 slow taps. Do not worry about counting. I can be in charge of that. And just tap in, close your eyes or, low gaze. The thought of using the container. Okay. Take a deep breath. Let that flow. I'm a big fan of let it flow rather than let it go, because if we could let things go, I'd be out of a job. It's not so easy. All right. So now we're going to put it to work a little bit more. So I want you to just think about a name for your container. So the container is like a broad thing. Now, when I'm doing this one-on-one, the person will tell me the name. You do not have to do that. And I'm not asking you to do that. That's personal. So you can name it. That way you can identify it. The more we can identify something, the more tangible it feels, the more we'll be able to use it. So I want you to repeat that name back to yourself and just notice how you feel again when you name it and you know you can use it. So now I want everyone to think of a mildly disturbing recent experience to put in your container. So when I say mildly disturbing, oftentimes we use a 1 to 10 scale of disturbance. 10 is like the most stressful, 5's in the middle, and 1's not at all. So think something that's like on a 5. We're not looking to bring up kind of the worst of the worst right now, but something that's mild. And I want you to take a moment, not tapping yet, but just take a moment to think about putting that experience into your container. Great. Now, if you noticed a positive shift, so if you notice any level of relief, whatever you might call it, a positive shift, we're going to take a moment to just do the slow tapping to sink into that feeling. A deep breath, and then we'll do 6 to 8 taps. Great. Okay, and then take a deep breath and let it flow. All right. Now we're going to rehearse. So this is the last part of practicing with this part of things. So I want you to imagine a time soon when you would anticipate needing your container. Rehearse how you will use it and imagine how you will respond. Just think about that. You can also use this for things that are coming up. It's going to give you a moment to do that. Okay. So again, you noticed a positive shift, and positive at all. Like it doesn't have to be like a total intense, like big feeling, but if you notice any positive shift, once again, we'll do our tapping. Now I'm going to mute because I have children running off energy downstairs. So I'm going to mute while we do our tapping. Okay. So just take a deep breath. So my encouragement to you, now that you have the container that exists for you wherever you go, use it, practice it. Sometimes you'll remember, sometimes you'll forget, sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't work as you had hoped. That's all coping tools, and that's okay. Like, I think, that's so important to know that if something doesn't work once or twice, even, doesn't mean it never will. It doesn't mean it's hopeless. It's just life shifts like that. But try it out and see how it goes. Does anyone have any questions for me? Or anything with regards to the container? Okay, great. And you can always, again, reach out to me personally if you have any questions or concerns. Again, my number's on the website. I'll say it at the end of this so everyone has it. And I can also give my email. So the second tool we're going to do is called the safe space. Also from EMDR, actually, correction, I'm sorry, they've changed it to a peaceful place. So very similar to what it sounds like. And I do apologize. Let me know if anyone's having any trouble with the sounds in the background. I told my husband to keep the kids busy, and in a dad's world, that's running around wild. So I'm putting it in the container and I'm pressing forward. But just let me know if any issues on that end. So with regard to the peaceful place, I want you to practice imagining a place or experience you had where you felt peaceful or calm. So if you can tell me about, well, usually you would tell me about it, going by what I'm used to saying. You don't have to tell me about it, but just think of a time that you felt peaceful or calm. And actually what is helpful is if it is a real place where you felt that, maybe on vacation, in your, house or spaces. Okay. Think about what you saw, you could hear, smell, touch, taste, and be as descriptive as possible for yourself. Okay. Now, does anyone have any reflections on any positive emotions or feelings they're having as they're imagining their peaceful place? And you can throw it into the chat. And I totally get if people aren't comfortable with that, so that's fine too. I know for me, my peaceful place is on the beach or family vacations in the Gulf, and it's just like white sand and clear water. And it's just so peaceful. And in the South, pro tip, they go back to school like early August. So if you go mid-August, it's so quiet. So it's always peaceful to think of there. So that's mine. So similar to what we did with the container, as you focus on your calm and peaceful place, slowly tap in your positive feelings and sensations and thoughts.
Why don't you skip?
Yeah, what's up?
We cut it in pieces for you.
Oh, I think, did you have a question or did you just come off of mute? Oh, we're back on mute. Okay, it happens. All right, so kind of go back to our tapping. And then maybe you did the butterfly taps the first time. Feel free to practice a different type of tapping, whether it's on the top of the legs or the walking in place with the feet. Sometimes it's nice to try different things. So we'll just do a round of tapping. Okay. So similar with the container, go ahead and give your peaceful place a name. And just repeat that name back and any positive feelings that you have with it. I'll call mine the beach. Okay. And so the difference between the container and the peaceful place is the containers, we're actually putting things away when it does not serve us and when we can feel that stress. The peaceful place is when we kind of need a break and a mental escape. Okay. So what I want you to think about, similar, is a stressful event that you had, a moment that you just felt really escalated. You were having trouble calming yourself down. Maybe a conflict with someone. Maybe you're getting stuck on unhelpful thoughts. And just picture using the peaceful place and going to your peaceful place. And just notice how shifting yourself into that space where you associate calm, peace, rejuvenation. And just once more, go ahead and practice the tapping in. Okay. And anyone have anything to note or any experiences that they're noticing? Okay. So what I would encourage you to do, the peaceful place I would bring up, you could actually almost do both in tandem too, right? Like say you're laying in bed and you have lots of worried thoughts coming up, maybe a situation from the day, and you're having trouble just falling asleep, which right affects self-care, and you're having trouble just kind of like tending to yourself. You put the situation in the container. You think, okay, this doesn't serve me. I can't do anything about it. I don't even know if what I'm thinking is true. If you're anything like me, you have a situation happen and then your mind completely blows it in a million directions. And half of those directions are probably not even based on reality. So you put that in the container and you tap, take a deep breath, let it flow, right? Because sometimes we just have to sit in feelings we don't love, but we know they won't last. Then you shift and you place yourself in your peaceful place, right? So then you just sit in that. And what's great in the peaceful place is that's where you really want to use the mindfulness. So mindfulness is being present in your peaceful place, being present in your hypothetical world. But, you know, so for the example of the beach, really like feeling the sand between my toes, the seagulls in the air, you know, you get that little kind of like salty taste in your mouth when the wind blows, the sounds of the ocean. Oh, I can only go there now. Maybe I'm just jonesing for it on these cold days, right? Sounds of happiness, people around you laughing, kids playing, you know, like a cold water on a hot day. Okay. So then really placing yourself there, calming yourself down and taking deep breaths while doing it. And when you focus on your deep breaths, then pulling in the deep breathing we talked about at the beginning. So if you're not tapping, you place one hand on your chest, one hand on your stomach, and you just think about sending that air into your stomach and really soaking up your peaceful place. And then in creeps in the situation from the day, the fight with the person or the boss or a doctor's visit that didn't go so well, or all of the dozens of things that can happen in someone's day, the person that cut you off in traffic, the thing you heard on the news. Okay, that's going to creep back in. Oh, I'm going to bring my focus back to putting it away in my container, securing that container, and bring myself back, right? So just kind of shifting and going with it. I'm all with the hands today, I guess. That's not unusual. So those are the tools that I had for us today. Again, like I'm a big fan of not overpiling, but I feel like that was probably a lot of information at the same time. Um, does does anybody have any questions? Would anybody like anything more? Feedback, anything at all?
Just a comment I'd like to share. I've been skeptical of the whole breathing thing, but once I actually tried it during a stressful situation, I was shocked at how well it worked.
Mhm.
So if you haven't tried it, don't knock it. It's yeah, really
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's all back to that, you know, the nervous system and calming the nervous system down. They're actually Navy SEALs do the square breathing. So it's like that's how you know it's got to work. Navy SEALs do. They're like the toughest people. But they do square breathing is like breathing in for 5, holding for 5, breathing out for 5, breathing in for 5, holding for 5, breathing out for 5. I don't know. That told me I'm like, okay, if they do it, there's something to this. Not that I didn't believe in it. So Cindy, someone asked, how does the eye movement work? So I can't speak to the Havening technique, because again, I'm not trained in that. So when I speak about eye movement, it's related to eye movement desensitization and the reprocessing model. It's also known more commonly as EMDR amongst people, if you have ever heard of it. So we use eye movement when we're actually reprocessing, whether it's past events or thinking into the future. So in a therapy session, what that would look like is I would sit to the side of someone, and they would be pretty close to me. So just like almost knee to knee facing me. So always my left my left knee and their left knee. I promise I know my left from my right, as I teach my kids that all the time too. And I move my hands back and forth in this motion, and they actually track my fingers with only their eyes, not moving their head, only their eyes. And what we're doing is activating the right and left parts of the brain, and it actually helps with reprocessing memory and traumatic memory to then help to rewire essentially the experience of a memory. I know that was like really a mouthful, but the kind of most similar connection and how we explain it before doing eye movements with processing is similar to that of REM sleep. So when your eyes dart back and forth in sleep, the difference is you're focusing on a specific problem and its negative and positive emotions and adding that. So your brain begins to problem solve. And since you're focused on a specific problem, you can work through it more effectively than what might come up randomly during REM sleep. And so the bilateral stimulation with the eyes activates the problem solving process. I hope that made sense, but that's about as best sense. Yeah, watch people play tennis. Yeah, move your eyes back and forth. Bring up a memory and watch people play tennis. Yeah, no, there's actually, I haven't used them in virtual. Just again, probably because I'm like not technology great. I just need to, you do it once and then you know how to do it. So I use a lot of tapping when we're doing virtual, and the tapping in processing is faster. But there are like apps and things that you can use on the computer that actually mimic the same thing. And then there's also light bars that people follow. So it's not always with the hands. So yeah, same idea. Same idea. And if anyone has any other questions about that. Now, again, it looks like if you maybe did like slow eye movements, there could be calming nature to that. I'll have to look into that. I'm glad. I always love learning something. And that's just a wonderful part of this field, is there are so many models and modalities out there that you are truly always learning. Anyone else before we wrap up? So my my number's on the website, so I'm not giving out like my personal whatever. This is my work cell, 610 389-9090. Anyone can call or text that. That's how all of our referrals come through. And you don't have to be a referral to reach out either. You can just be like, hey, I have a question. Oh, perfect. Mark put it up. Thank you so much. So yeah, there's my contact in the chat, my email as well. Don't hesitate to reach out. As I mentioned, we're kind of working on some technical issues with our forms. So I never want anyone to think I'm not getting back to them. Email or phone would be best. Hopefully in the next week, we'll have that worked out. It's kind of a sudden thing, but technology.
Any further questions, thoughts, comments for Emily tonight? I hope everyone has found this useful, helpful, stimulating, thought-provoking, all of the above.
I try to bring some different things. I know, with the use of social media, which is, some benefits to it, right? And even Google, a lot of people are aware of your general mindfulness tactics. We have all these great apps that share that with us, or even just I scroll, I'm an admitted Instagram user, can't get into TikTok, but admitted Instagram. And so I'll see, these different tools. So I do try to bring something forward that maybe people haven't tried or had yet. Great.
We don't have anything else. We'll call it a night. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, we're getting some thanks in there. Wonderful.
Awesome. Yeah, no, so great. Thank you everyone for joining. You could totally put my loud children into your container. I think I did that the whole time too. I do appreciate your patience and hope to see you all again sometime.
All right. Thank you, Emily, for your time tonight.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Good night, everyone.